Well, welcome to another live Q&A for worship leaders with Jake and Spencer. My name is Jake Goslin, and I am joined by my friend Spencer Cormany. I'll bring him in here for you. There he is. And the agenda for today is, as you guys log on to the live stream here in YouTube, please go ahead and leave your questions in the chat. We will be answering your worship leader church tech ministry questions that you have here live. And we also are going to be fielding questions that were sent into us by email. So we'll be hanging out here for about 45 or so minutes. If we haven't met, my name is Jake Goslin. I'm the creator of churchfront.com, helping you lead gospel-centered and tech-savvy worship. I'm also the creator of worshipleaderschool.com, where you're going to find all your essential training, advice, and support to plan and lead worship. So you can go over here to Worship Leader School and check that out, and you can apply to join today. And then my friend Spencer Cormany, he's the founder of Leading Worship Well. He's got an amazing blog. He's got an amazing Instagram account. Head on over to his website when you get a chance and download his 5 tips to instantly improve your worship leading audio training that he has available for you. So with that said, all the housekeeping done, Spencer, let's go ahead and dive into the first question from email.
All right. The first question comes from Ben. And he says, I am a professional musician who was hired a few years ago as a contemporary worship leader at a small church. So far, I have taught songs by using MP3s and chord sheets rather than lead sheets or music notation. His first question is, would you ever recommend slowly incorporating music notation? And if so, would you teach music notation separate from weekly repertoire or introduce it within the weekly repertoire? So personally on my team, we just use chord charts, which I think is what he's using right now. In my mind, there's sort of 2 ways to read music in a worship team. You have chord charts and then you have music notation. I don't see very many worship teams using music notation just because of the nature of the music. Like worship songs generally are just chords. I know there's like lead parts in there, but I don't see myself using music notation with my team. How about you, Jake?
Yeah, we rarely have to use music notation. I think it comes in handy if you have someone on your team who is classically trained. Like I've had this scenario before where we have a pianist who really needed music notation to pick up the melody lead lines. Like if there's a special piano part in a song that you just had to have. For example, the introduction of 10,000 Reasons Bless the Lord, right? And that piano player needed a lead sheet or notation to pick out what that melody was. Because some people can do it great on using sheet music, but some people can also do it by ear. I think, though, for the most part, having sheet music is pretty unnecessary, a little bit burdensome for your band members. My goal all the time is if I'm going to provide a chord chart I do provide a chord charts for my team, mainly for them to learn the song and practice at home. But I create a chord chart. I make sure everything fits onto one side of one page. And I format it so I have 2 columns of text with the chords. And that especially makes it easy for them when they use it on a Sunday morning. I encourage people to memorize, but I always find and have found that chord charts make people less dependent on the music. They're not flipping through pages. I don't really think you want that in a modern worship environment.
Yeah, I think you made a good point about keyboardists, because that is the one instrument that I could see that coming into play, just because piano players typically, that's what they work off of if they're not playing in a band. So they might be coming in with that experience, and that might make the transition to playing in a worship team easier for them. But I mean, especially if you're serving in a small church. I mean, I guess small churches can have professional musicians too, but generally just in churches in general, the people coming into your church and playing on your worship team aren't necessarily going to be professional musicians who know music notation. So I think they're going to be coming in learning from chord charts already and tabs if they're a guitar player. So I just use those to make things easier for them.
Great. We have some great questions coming in on the chat. We have twins Twins.media. Oops, sorry, this shifted down on me. Sorry. We have Twins.media ask, what do you think about electric conversion drums for churches, like acoustic shells and then triggers and mesh heads? I have not used them myself. I'm not opposed to using them necessarily. I know some churches who do really like them a lot. So unfortunately, I have no expertise in this area, but it could be a good solution to help control the volume of drums on stage, and you don't have to worry about miking because it's all done virtually. My friend Josh Shaw in his church, Lighthouse Church, you can go to Lighthouse Church TV. They probably have some worship recordings floating around. They just recorded a worship night, and he uses it's like a Pearl drum set. It looks like it's acoustic, but I'm pretty sure that's exactly what they're doing, is they just use triggers to create those drum sounds. So could be a great option for some people.
Yep. How about Luis or Luis? How can I connect my in-ears to my piano? So just a simple in-ear setup. Jake, why don't you handle that, since you've talked about that a million times? Simple solution for that.
Yeah, so if you're just trying, I'm not really sure what your goal is here, Luis. You might have to unpack that a little bit more, because if you're just trying to connect your headphones to your piano, you may need to get a 3.5 millimeter to 1/4 inch adapter. A lot of piano headphone outputs are 1/4 inch. So that's what I'm assuming you're asking right now. If you're doing a full in-ear monitor system, though, you'll have to send your piano to your sound console, and then from your sound console to your in-ear monitor system, whether that's wireless, whether it's wired with a headphone amp, whether it's a personal digital mixer, whether it's the Soundcaster app. I mean, there's multiple ways you can send an in-ear mix. So that's kind of the gist of how you'd get that up and running.
Ricardo asks, speaking of chord charts, what formats do you use to share with your team through planning services? Do you use the Nashville number system, or traditional lyrics with chords? Personally, for my team, I just have the lyrics with the chords over it, although my team does know the Nashville number system, but I just find it easier, especially if new people are coming in who don't know the Nashville number system, then it's easier to just have those chords instead of just the numbers. So one less step for them to learn, and then they'll learn the Nashville number system over time, because that's important for our team.
Yeah, for me, we just use the traditional chord over words technique. Here's a little look into how I set it up. This is in Planning Center for the song Freedom, and I just am a huge advocate for using Planning Center for hosting all your chord charts and stuff like that. You can even do it for free if you don't want to use Planning Center for scheduling people. You can just use it for your digital song library. So like here's all my songs in Planning Center. And then I'll just go back into Freedom here. It's the song we just did. I'll go to my default arrangement. Now we see all the chord charts and the MP3 files. When I go to the lyrics and chord editor here, you'll see I use the chord on the left side here. This is the Chord Pro version of the chord chart. So we put the little chords in brackets. I think Chord Pro in this format makes it nice and easy if you're changing font sizes or keys. The way it's going to look here on the right side, on the published side, it's just always going to stay consistent. So this is an example of what I was saying earlier, how I want to keep all of my charts on one page so nobody's flipping throughout the service. I'll put all the song sequence, like I'll kind of lay it out basically in order. If something repeats, I'll just say chorus 1 instead of writing out chorus 1 again. So that's my very simple chord chart technique. The nice part, though, about Planning Center is that, let's say we wanted to have the number version here. I could actually have numerals or numbers if you look on the top right of the screen. So I can click these two buttons. Now when I go back to the song, I can go ahead and actually download just a number chart for the song right here. So really, really slick what Planning Center has set up here. I would highly recommend setting your song library up in there as well. So sorry about that tangent, but today I figured out how to get all these screens up on the live stream so we can show you stuff this time. All right, what do we have next, Spencer?
I think those chord charts look great. That's exactly how mine looks. And just another thought on, somebody was asking about music notation earlier. If your band is using music while they're playing, which is going to segue into the next question that I have, then you don't want to you want to keep it as simple as possible. And that's what a chord chart is. If you have music notation in front of them, then they're just going to be standing there staring at the music notation the whole time, like notes on a page. So I think that's sort of why bands typically use chords instead of the full notation, because it's simpler and people aren't staring at their music the whole time. Which transitions into the next question from Hannah. Hannah asks, I keep hearing that we should memorize music. Any thoughts or tips on this? And let's just start with that. Should you memorize your music? And I am an advocate for memorizing your music because I think that it sets you up to lead better because you aren't focused on playing. There's something that happens whenever you memorize your music where it just sort of becomes a part of you and it's like second nature, as opposed to having it in front of you where you're like, okay, well, a G chord comes next, so I'm going to play that. And that's what you're thinking about instead of just sort of, and I don't know if you feel this way, Jake, but I always feel like I can feel the music. Like I'm not thinking, oh, there's a D chord next. I just go to the D chord. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, for sure. I think to me, especially at this kind of stage of musicianship I'm in, hearing chord progressions and just knowing where the song's going, it does become second nature if you just do it over time. So to me, it's not memorizing chords to a song that's ever a challenge. It's more the lyrics, but when I invest that time into doing it and I can get my eyes off our confidence monitor and focus more on the congregation, it's just so much better. I don't know. There's really no good excuse to not memorize your lyrics, I guess you would say. You know, it's just kind of a discipline and time issue. So sit down with the lyrics of the song, read through them, think about what story the song is telling, what theology the song is talking about. When you can kind of view the song as a cohesive whole, like you can really memorize it better. I think often we just kind of think in the song in terms of different phrases and lines, and all of our worship songs start blending together, and you have to think about it as a cohesive whole or a cohesive unit, and that's helped me memorize lyrics of songs. So then when I'm coming into like the second verse of a certain song, I'm like, okay, this is the verse about Jesus dying on the cross, right? There's not a whole lot of different stories that we're covering in worship songs, but if you can kind of memorize the flow of them in a particular song, then you shouldn't have a hard time memorizing those lyrics.
Yeah, and then the other tip there for memorizing is to take it slowly, because you do get better at it over time, so you don't want to jump in. Like, I don't think that if I was starting out that I could just jump in and we do 6 songs during a worship service. I don't think that I could have them all memorized if I was starting from 0. So start with, I mean, it depends how much you want to break it down. I think 1 song would be good to start with trying to memorize that. You could break it down even further to just like the chorus or something, because you probably know the chorus anyway. So break it down into small chunks, and then as you keep building, it becomes easier over time.
Derek asks, is it possible to lead a worship as an electric guitar player instead of being the front man, being on the front side and having someone else sing and play acoustic? So, yeah, I think, if you're not the one singing and kind of pastoring the congregation through the service, I don't know if I would consider that worship leader, because that's definitely something that a worship leader is expected to do and does. But I think your role could be more of a music director or band director, and you're supporting the worship leaders who are singing and praying and doing all that stuff in the service, but you're also leading the band. So maybe you're planning all the music stuff, you're coordinating the arrangements, you're prepping all the charts week in and week out. It's a very normal thing, and that role is called music director, an MD, or a band leader.
Yeah, or in the case of my first job in the early 2000s, praise team coordinator. A very cool title. We should bring that back. That's basically what I did. I whenever I was 16, I became the praise team coordinator at my church, and I wasn't actually leading worship like out front. I was just playing acoustic guitar and musically directing the band. So if that's what you're talking about, yes, I think it's possible. Awesome. Here's an interesting question from the Pied Piper 7. He says, can Ableton Live speak out chord numbers ahead of time? So could you have it say like 1 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord? What do you
Yeah,
think on that, Jake?
yeah, you could definitely do that. That might get pretty crazy, pretty obnoxious, pretty fast, but it's possible. You just need to create a second guide cues track. Maybe you could fit it on your guide cues, but you would just have cues. Maybe you could record on your mic or find some cues that say 1 or 2, 3, 4, whatever numbers you need to say, and you could definitely do that. Would I recommend it? I don't know. I mean, Ableton can do a lot, but I feel like that would, hearing the guide constantly all the time, that could get kind of weird.
Definitely. I am going to come out with a voice pack, though, for click tracks and say 1 chord, 2 chord, 7 diminished.
We never play 7 diminished. It's worship music.
Did I do all the time? We do jazz. Hey, back to Ben from the email. He had another question. He said, in a small church setting, do you recommend playing with a click track and utilizing supplemental tracks and loops? So specifically in a small church context is what he's asking.
Yeah, I think if you have the infrastructure, if you have in-ear monitoring, playing with a click will help your band sound tighter and sound better, and then you can use however much supplemental tracks or loops you want to use, whether it's just pads in the background. You could start buying multi-tracks. It's definitely not going to make it sound worse in my 4 years of experience of using click and tracks. So you can really, especially when you're using Ableton, but even if you want to use Prime or Playback, you can really use it to however you'd like to use it, and you can start implementing however many of these tools you would like. It doesn't, just because you're going to start using a click and tracks doesn't mean you have to have full multi-track stems with full automation with lyrics and lights. No, just start simple. Start with getting the click to your musicians' ears, and then maybe add a guide in there, and then add the tracks.
Here's a question for you, because I think this is part of what he's asking too, like the balance of how many tracks you should use. Because if you're leading in a small church and you have an in-ear system and you want to play with a click, but it's just you and your acoustic guitar, do you think it's okay to add like all of those other tracks in there, like bass and drum and keyboard, if it's just you up there?
I think you have to do it tastefully, and if we ever have a setting where, actually, even my church, if it's ever like an acoustic set, we still play with a click. Just to, like it was a few weeks ago, back on Christmas Eve, my wife and I did like a light acoustic set, me on guitar, her on piano, and then we had some ambient pads playing, kind of just support us underneath. And then we played with a click, and we automated our lyric slides too. But it still felt very stripped down in acoustic. So, I wouldn't, like, if it's my personal taste and opinion, I don't know, I wouldn't like to put a backing tracks of a full drum set in there. But there's a lot of cool options out there where you could use just maybe some certain loops or some beats that just sound appropriate for the song and the arrangement. So that's where I think there's kind of a whole untapped area of making arrangements for worship songs. I think, well, you'll find a lot of them at loopcommunity.com, but even so, it's like, I think what could be cool is to see more of what, I don't know if Spencer, have you seen any of the covers we've had on our YouTube channel lately, but Boomer's been producing these covers for, like we did Yes and Amen the other day, and that I feel like could work really well for someone who wants the click and tracks, a bigger sound, but it's like arranged for a more acoustic, electric vibe instead of just like throwing in all the original master tracks of a song. I feel like that could feel awkward doing that if it's just you. So that's why, I mean, my kind of non-negotiables are, do I have a full acoustic drummer? And then from there, I'll be okay with adding in, some electric guitar tracks and things like that. But if I don't have a full acoustic drummer, I'll maybe add in some light percussion from the tracks, which a lot of them have, but I won't add in the drum set.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I feel like it feels like almost like karaoke or something if you add too many tracks in whenever you don't have the physical musicians to support it. Just feels like you're playing along with a track. This question's from Caleb. Caleb says, our lead guitarist said he's going to start turning up his amp louder to force the AV team to match his volume because we are too quiet on Sunday mornings. How would you address this? LOL. And I think definitely do not do that. Tell him not to do that, but instead have a conversation with the audio people and tell them if that's what you want. If you want the overall volume to be louder, then tell them that and set the precedent, like set a dB level that they should be shooting for instead of just saying this should be louder. Like give them a goal that they should be looking for that sounds right for your room.
Yeah, sounds like there might need to be some sound mixing coaching going on here, helping your sound techs know where does an electric guitar fall in the mix, and help them hear that. Maybe listen to some albums with them. It's weird. I've struggled this all the time with church sound techs. It's like, we as worship leaders know the songs like the back of our hand, and we know all the crucial parts, like that lead line, that synth line, or that guitar line, and then we get out there and it's just like, in the main mix, if we're ever, taking a listen to what it sounds like, it's like, where's the electric guitar? Like, that's such a crucial part of the song. Some people don't have an ear for that. We just have to keep coaching them with that.
Yep. Back to the questions from email. This one's from Adam. Adam asks, can you please explain how you set up the pre-service loop and music on Ableton, how it draws from ProPresenter? I'm still having a little trouble. Is that easy enough to talk through, Jake?
Yes, it's easy enough to talk to here.
Or are you going to show it, though?
Oh, to actually show it.
I was just
let me look at. Sorry, I was looking through some comments really quickly. Let's see here. So he's asking, set up pre-service loop and music on Ableton, how it draws from ProPresenter. Still having a little trouble. This one, it's a little hard to talk through, but what's happening is, okay, I have a collection of triggers at the beginning of my Ableton set, just MIDI cues, and they're just sending MIDI cues to ProPresenter, and it says, hey, ProPresenter, cue up the first document in our playlist, which is, for us, it's our pre-service loop of slides. So, we have our announcement slides. There's like 4 or 5 slides, like, alpha is coming up, or sign your kids up for this, or whatever. And that's settings you configure within ProPresenter. So you just trigger that first slide, and then ProPresenter knows to loop those slides. And then we also tell ProPresenter, hey, play this pre-service playlist of songs, our pre-service music, so like a Bethel album or whatever album it is. And ProPresenter does that. And also, we queue up the lights as well. So we have basically one command. Like I queue up the right spot in Ableton in my set. I hit play. It hits all those MIDI triggers, and then all of those things happen in ProPresenter and lighting. So I think that might help answer the question. I think that Adam actually is a student of Worship Leader School. So Adam, if you happen to be one of the 38 people watching this right now, just reach out to me in Worship Leader School, and we can get this figured out.
All right, next question comes from Andrew. He said, I'm leading worship, and I'm wondering what I can do about having or not having a bass player. Ableton Live isn't really an option right now with our current equipment. So basically, you have a band without a bass player. I think that that you can get away with not having a bass player. I'm all for bass players. My brother plays bass, but you want that low end, but I think that you can sort of work around it if you don't have it. For example, if you have a keyboard player, they can start playing a lot more stuff in their left hand, which gives you that low end, or you can just work on the arrangements of your songs so that they fit in a way that doesn't have a bass player. So for my band, sometimes we don't have a bass player, and we're more acoustic, so we just use 2 acoustic guitars and maybe a cajon. So maybe you need to reconfigure the way that you arrange your songs and the different instruments that you use. So like use what you do have well. Jake, what do you think about not having a bass player?
I think another option that you can do, it's going to be a bit more work, but you need to find and recruit someone. There's got to be someone at your church. I started learning bass when I was in 5th grade because the band at our church didn't have a bass player, and my brother played drums, and they're like, "Hey, Jake, you want to learn how to play bass and play in the band?" And I'm like, "Sure." So find a fifth grader who is capable of learning how to play bass. Maybe someone older,
or a kindergartner,
or well, they got to be big enough to like actually
That's true.
reach the fretboard. Because it's not a complicated instrument. Yes, you can become a very good bass player, but find someone who wants to play, and then watch this. I'll pull this up for you. This is a cool website I found, scottsbasslessons.com. I just heard good things about it. I think it's a really cool site. So it's like a membership site where you can go learn how to play bass. So find a site like this, and I'm pretty sure it's a pretty low monthly fee they have for it, and encourage that person to learn how to play. And it's not going to take long to learn how to play bass to the skill level you need to start playing in a worship band. So that is my advice on that.
Daniel asks, any advice for a first-time band leader that you've come to learn over time? So I'm thinking of my best general advice for being a band leader. And I think I'll say over-communicating. Because I think oftentimes when we're in leadership, we think if we just say things once, people have heard it and understand it and will take action on it. But especially whenever you're communicating vision or some sort of change, you need to talk about it a lot because people don't pick up on it the first time. Like as the leader, you've probably thought about it over and over again before you've communicated it. But once you communicate it, that person's only heard it once. It's kind of like the balance between the worship band playing songs and getting tired of them compared to the congregation. Like you've put in all this time as the worship band to prepare this song and you led your congregation in it, and they've only heard it once for the 50 times that you've heard it. It's the same thing with us in leadership and communicating vision. You've thought about the vision 50 times longer than whenever you communicate it, the person's only heard it once. So just over communicating, like communicating more than you think is necessary, I think is a good tip for that.
Great. Yeah, I don't have much more to add to that other than just you need to know when you start listening to songs, just start picking out all those different parts. Be listening to what's the third electric guitar player in this Hillsong playing or something like that. You just really want to develop your ear. If you can get access to looking at master tracks of songs, maybe download some prime tracks or multi-track stuff and just see like what's the anatomy of this song. Really, really know that if you're going to be a band leader, so then you can be listening to your band and helping kind of guide and critique them along the way. Hannah asked, are you using ProPresenter on stage or using sheet music? We use ProPresenter as a band. Obviously, we use ProPresenter for the congregation to see the screen behind us so they can see the lyrics, but then also we have the stage display enabled on a confidence monitor, so we just see the lyrics and we see the upcoming slide lyrics. So that's how we use it as a band, and then we don't use any sheet music on stage. We kind of talked about that earlier in the session today, mainly just using chord charts.
All right. Alex asks, what do you think about bringing in people to play versus waiting until people that can play come to church? So he's asking, do you think it's okay to bring people in from outside of the church to supplement the band whenever you don't have the musicians that you need in your church? And I'll share my thoughts, and then I'd love to hear your opinion, Jake. For me personally, I like to allow the worship team to grow as the church grows, because I like to give people inside my church the opportunity to serve. And depending on the size of your church, I'm guessing that there's at least one person that you haven't tapped into. I know that this is true in my church, that I haven't tapped into that could be on the worship team. And my job is to find them and ask them to be on the worship team. While I think that automatically looking outside of the church relieves you of that responsibility of raising up the people in your church. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, I think it's both. You can, if you have needs you need to fill, find someone outside the church. If they want to do it, they want to volunteer their time, great. If you need to hire them to do it, great. But then also, be proactive about asking and recruiting from within your church body. Chances are there's people who have potential, but it's our but they don't know it, and it's our responsibility as leaders to kind of help pull that out of them. So those are my 2 cents on that. And let's take a quick little break here, and I want to share with you guys who are on the stream today 2 online resources that Spencer and I have available for you here. We've got worshipleaderschool.com. This is a site I've created to help equip you as a worship leader. And here's what it is. It's a membership site. Once you join Worship Leader School, you have access to our course library. So you can actually see all of this. If you go to worshipleaderschool.com right now, you can hit course library, and you can browse through the different courses we have. They're all video courses. So here's a course on Planning Center, getting everything organized, actually kind of showing you step by step what I showed you a few minutes ago with my chord charts and Planning Center. Music theory course. We have a course on speaking and praying in worship, knowing how to pastor your congregation, stuff with getting started with the click and tracks, leading your band in rehearsal, and then my whole Ableton Live training. Lots of stuff there. And then we just also released a church sound course and a mixing masterclass. Super in-depth, like over 6 hours of content within that course. So you're going to learn a ton about it. We also have the community forum here in the school, so you can go and connect with other worship leaders. And then you can also hop on an office hours call. So like that's what I'm doing today, like in a half hour from now. Hopping on an office hour session where I block out 2 times per week time to connect with students of Worship Leader School, help them work through whatever it is they're working through. So in about a half hour, I'm hopping on a call with 3 worship leaders who are within inside the school. So to get signed up it's easy. You have to apply because I want to make sure everybody who joins Worship Leader School is a good fit. You just go to the Apply Now page, and you're going to complete this brief form. You're going to select a time when you and I can meet over Zoom, and if Worship Leader School is the right fit after we meet and discuss it, you'll be able to join and have instant access. And then I also want to bring attention to leadingworshipwell.com. This is a great resource that Spencer has created, has a blog. He has this free training, 5 tips to instantly improve your worship leading. So you can download that now, listen to this training on your commute. Any other resources you want to point people towards, Spencer?
Just the Instagram page, too. I love to interact with people on Instagram, and that's where I'm mainly hanging out and communicating with people. So go follow me on Instagram at Leading Worship Well.
Yeah, he's got one of the best, definitely one of the best worship leading tip Instagrams out there. Definitely follow him. All right, let's go back to the questions.
All right. Max asks, do you use music sheets on iPads, and how do you sync them by Ableton? Obviously, we've talked about how we don't use music sheets, but Jake, do you know how to sync that with Ableton?
Yeah, it's pretty doable as long as whatever you're using to play your music sheets has MIDI functionality, and you can trigger like the next page button in it. It's pretty easy to do. I'm pretty sure the Music Stand app is able to do that. The one that comes with Planning Center, I think OnSong, I know people are able to do it with that app as well. The capabilities there. You just need your network, Wi-Fi network, and then you just need to create whatever cues you need to tell it, in Ableton's timeline to advance to the next song or page. Very similar to what you would do with ProPresenter or lighting. But I have not set it up myself because, again, I try to not have to ever use charts in worship. And as I explained earlier, all of our band members, like their chord charts are all just single sheets. So they only have to flip the page once in between songs.
AZ asks, how can I run my pedalboard directly to a PA system? So if you want to bypass an amp, you need some sort of modeler, because a pedalboard doesn't really work just plugged into a PA system it will work, but it won't sound very good because what that pedalboard is doing is affecting the sound of the amp, not really your guitar itself. What makes it sound good is it's interacting with the amp. So you need the pedal board to be plugged into something that you can, if you're going to add overdrive to it, there needs to be something that can be overdriven, I guess is the word. And it won't sound very good if you try to just plug that into a PA system. So either you need a modeler or I think there's some other names for that too. I can't, like a profiler, like a Kemper is something that I see a lot of people using with a pedal board. So you could try that, or what I use is just the modeler by itself, like a floor unit, where I don't have a big pedal board with a bunch of different pedals. I just have one unit. I use a Line 6. I use an old XT pod, which is super old, but it still sounds good, so I use that. And that kind of that has those effects in there, but also it has an amp modeler in it. Have you ever done anything like that, Jake?
I don't do much, but I have the Line 6 pulled up here for you guys to see here and what you'd want ideally. This is kind of the Cadillac, I think, of guitar multi-effects processing. So there's other ones, smaller ones you could probably find as well. But on the back of these, you'll see it has an XLR output right here, left and right, so you could actually run stereo into your sound system, have a really nice full really the sound to it, and yeah, that could sound really cool depending on what effects you're using. So yeah, you wanna get it so you're sending a balanced signal to your sound system. That's the key. So a lot of these higher end pedal boards, they have these XLR outs, which those are the balanced outputs. I'm trying to think, if you had another one, I don't know, like maybe I don't think you'd want to get a pedal that's like too inexpensive if it doesn't have balanced outputs on it. I'm not super familiar with this world. I'm an acoustic guy, but yeah, go check out Brian Wall's YouTube channel, Worship Tutorials. He's got a ton of stuff on guitars and multi-effects pedals and things like that.
Yeah. The Refugees asks, how do I convince our worship leader to use tracks coming from a band member? He's in denial. So Jake, I am someone who doesn't use tracks when I lead worship. Convince me to use tracks.
I'll break into your house at night with a really scary costume and then come into No, it's like one of those, I'm just picturing one of those scenes where someone like just breaks in and is like, you must use tracks or else. And then like the next morning they're like, we're gonna use tracks or else we'll die. No, I'm trying to think, how do you lead up, right? That's a question here. I don't know, man. Like it's hard. Like you can present to them. I would find out their objections. Ask them, why do you not want to use tracks? I would get a clear picture of what their objections are to it, and also clearly articulate to them the benefits of it. So be like, hey, ask the worship leader, would you be interested in our worship band playing in time together perfectly and never losing our spots? Would you be interested in our rehearsals taking about half the time that they currently do? Because, people forget, how many times do we do the bridge after the second chorus in the third song? Something like that. Or would you be interested in if the band sound really full? Like we had that kind of big epic sound they hear from Hillsong Worship or Bethel Music. And if they say yes to those questions, then it's kind of naturally like, well, the vehicle to take us there is using a click and tracks in worship. And then you can actually do a lot of other cool stuff like automating lyrics and lighting and all that stuff Ableton can do. But if they're not really sold on the transformation of what the end benefit is, then they're not going to want to do it. A lot of worship leaders hear click and tracks and they think, oh, it's too much gear, it's confusing, it's intimidating, I'm never going to do it. So make sure you pitch clearly the transformation. That's how I do it.
Sounds good. Hey, if you guys have questions, keep them coming in chat and we'll keep answering. This one is from the email, though. This is from David. He said, when using master tracks from multi-tracks with my band, which if you don't know what those are like the authentic recordings from the actual recordings of the song. So there's sort of two things when it comes to multi-tracks. You can get like the actual recordings that you hear on the album, just the stems, or you can get ones that people have created that sort of replicate those. So he's talking about the ones from the actual albums, like from the recording studio. And he says, can we still live stream and upload our worship services if we use that, legally speaking? And Jake, you work with clicks. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, and it's funny you asked this because today, all morning, I'm working on a new course for Worship Leaders School called Worship and Copyright Law, because I think this is something that a lot of us think we know what we need to know about this. But then I've been a worship leader for 10 years, and then this morning after researching for this course, I'm like, wow, there's a lot I didn't know. And now, not like our church is doing a bunch of illegal stuff. It's more just like I just have a much better understanding of how the system works, how it's all set up, and what we need to do to make sure that we're covered with it. So here is CCLI's page about, and I'm not going to go into the details of what CCLI is. Most likely, your church is paying them money right now to be licensed to do the stuff that you need to be licensed for, which I'll be covering in my course. But here is a page about streaming licensing in terms of agreement, because this is what this question is. So permitted activities is, let's see here. An activity or active license allows you to stream participating songs from your church's website, a hosted website, or a streaming service in the following manner. So I'm assuming like, Facebook and YouTube would fall into there as well. Live streaming songs performed in your church's service in audio and video form, and even uploading them. But the question is about, okay, what about the master tracks that we're playing alongside of our band? Where does that become defined? Because they don't define that clearly right here. At least I'm not seeing it. And my assumption is that those tracks, if you've purchased them legally through like Loop Community or Multitracks or wherever you've purchased them legally to use them in your band, these tracks are a supplement or a part of your worship band, and they could be just treated like any other instrument. I don't know. You may have to consult, reach out directly to CCLI. I may even reach out to them directly about this. We just don't do streaming at our church, but I know churches that do a lot of streaming, and they use backing tracks, and I don't think they've run into issues. I think you run into issues on streaming, especially to Facebook and YouTube, when you're just playing a recording of a song. Like Facebook will detect that and be like, hey, you can't play that. But I feel like it's different when you're just kind of bringing in one of the tracks of a song or a couple of the tracks of a song rather than the actual final product of that song. So just go to CCLI, look around their website, then I would honestly just hop on a phone call with them. You can go down to their phone support, this number right here. Give them a call and explain that question. And like I said, this is something I might actually do this as well to get some clarity around this topic. But I think it's a really great question.
Cool. Where's the question now? Caleb asks, we're trying to introduce DMX lighting to our church this year. Jake, is your setup with LightKey a good starting point for learning and training volunteers, or would it be too overwhelming?
Yes, I think LightKey is super user-friendly. That's why I recommend it and I enjoy using it so much. Yes, so go to my LightKey video that I have. Just search LightKey Churchfront on YouTube. Look through that video. I walk you through all of the pieces of gear that you're going to need. And LightKey has great support videos, tutorials. I'm working on a course for Worship Leader School right now for kind of really more in-depth, like step-by-step for the process. But I don't even think you need a course at this point, like at least to get the basics of it up and running. So definitely go with that. It's going to be super user-friendly. My volunteers, after we switched from my DMX to LightKey, they were just like, oh, man, this is so much better. So definitely check it out.
All right. Chuck says in the emails, he says, I'm wanting to build a lead team with legitimate responsibilities, or a worship team with legitimate responsibilities other than just playing music and running equipment. My struggle is finding out what can and should realistically be delegated to the worship team, or the lead team he's calling it. I'm just curious what the structure looks like on your team, or what setups have you used in the past that worked or didn't work. So I think what Chuck is saying is that he's in charge of the team, but he wants to get other people involved, and he's not sure what responsibilities he can delegate that won't be too much for them. And I think one practical thing is to include them in the planning process, at least of a worship service. So that could be picking out songs. I think that's a great responsibility for people to have, especially if you're not the only one who's leading the songs. You can have other people give their input on the song. So be like, this is where our pastor is headed this week. What songs do you think would fit well with that? And then you can work on that together. I think resourcing the team, I mean, I think there's a lot that you can delegate. I think that's sort of how you should lead in a church, is to delegate responsibilities and equip other people to serve. Do you have any specifics that come to mind, Jake?
Yeah, for anything, if you're trying to equip people and kind of empower them, delegate to them different parts of the process that they can take on, I would look at everything you're doing right now, week in, week out as a worship leader, and document it all step by step. Maybe make some video tutorials and stuff like that. You could use a platform like Worship Leader School to show how some of this preparation process works. And that's kind of the key, is make standard operating procedures for everything that you do and that you're currently doing. And then you can look at it and be like, okay, like you could get with someone and be like, here's the steps of how I go about planning out a worship service, or how I pick songs. Here's how I create charts for those songs. Here's how I add other practice resources like MP3 files for the band to practice. Here's how I do Ableton Live. Stuff like that. You got to create standard operating procedures for them, or little mini courses. Again, I go back to Worship Leader School. That's kind of part of the purpose of it too, is like you can log a worship leader onto there and then just kind of train them in that system of things that you said beyond just playing songs and running some of the tech stuff. You can actually get them in that planning process. So, yeah.
All right. Christine's asks, are you planning on running Dante?
Yeah, I would like to in the near future, when I have some time to I just gotta sit down and order something, order a Dante card, and I got to figure out, okay, what do I need to connect it to our Midas board and get it up and running. So I would love to do that for running our Ableton tracks, and as well as give us more flexibility when we record multi-track recordings of our service. So yes, I don't know when, but yes.
All right. Another question, what lights do you recommend for band lighting?
My favorite lighting, well, I'll show you what lights that we are using for our church. They are called ETC Source for Juniors. Let me pull this up on the screen for you guys. So I like these lights a lot. Pull that up. The Source Force to Junior, I think these ellipsoidal lights are the best for front lighting band members, for speakers on your stage, anything, because they're like these little mini spotlights. You have a lot of control over where the light is being thrown. If you get those cheaper par cans and stuff like that, they kind of just flood the stage. I wouldn't use those for that. Par cans or Fresnels are another type of light. Those are kind of softer lights that you can use as maybe backlighting or hair lighting. Definitely use ellipsoidal spotlights for that. So this is a key word you're looking for, ellipsoidal. And I would plan on, for every area on stage you want to light, get a pair of these. But at our church, we just use two of them. One's mounted kind of on the trusses on the front of the stage, and they're just covering the whole front of the stage, and it works great. So I think it's about $348, $700 worth of lights that we have just for front lighting. And then all of our LED lights we use kind of around and back of the stage.
All right. You want to wrap this up with one more question, Jake?
I do. So let's
All right.
go ahead and let me navigate here. Back to the comments. Okay, this is a good one. De Cruz asks, should we stick to MIDI with main stage or get a Nord? Hey, if you have the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, whichever model you want to get to purchase a Nord, go right ahead. You're definitely more than welcome to do that. There's benefits of having a really nice keyboard that has all the built-in sounds and effects, and I would definitely get ready to spend the time to learn how to navigate it. I always think, though, and would say my go-to recommendation for churches is to do the MIDI keyboard, get an Akai or M Audio controller within a laptop running MainStage or Ableton. That's always my recommendation. But if you're like a pro, you have the money, why not? If it's not, if it's an option, go ahead and do it. You could still run sounds from the Nord directly and pull audio from the Nord, and you could also connect MainStage and then run sounds from that, and then you could bounce back and forth between which keyboard you want to use. I mean, there's so much fancy stuff you could do in setting this up. So that concludes, our last question. Man, it's been 50 minutes already. Time flies when we are having fun, but this time we are ending today on time. I got to hop onto an office hours call with some students here in a few minutes. So thank you guys so much for logging on. If you're still logged on to the call, I see you guys there. I just want to invite you to go check out leadingworshipwell.com. Go download Spencer's free audio guide he's got there. Go to his Instagram account. He's got an amazing Instagram. Sorry, I was like poking through these things. There we go. There's his Instagram account. Go check it out. He just always has great stories every day and great posts every day. So this is Instagram done well. I like to think my Instagram's done well too, but it's different. I don't post quite as much. I usually just post like when I have YouTube videos released and stuff like that. So you can follow me at Churchfront, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel here. Hit that thumbs up on this live session if it added value to you. And I want to hopefully meet you someday. If you go to worshipleaderschool.com and let's see here, I pulled the right URL for you. Go to worshipleaderschool.com. You can learn more about the site, about the courses that we have here in the course library, and then apply to join. And then we can hop on a Zoom call and we can meet each other and we can figure out if Worship Leaders School is a good fit. I think that's all I have. You have anything else, Spencer, before we sign off?
I think you covered it.
Awesome. So grateful for you all. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and we will see you next week.